Welcome back to Don't Forget the Champagne. I'm Nichelle, and this is Wedding Planning 101. Today we're going to be talking about wedding officiants, and wedding officiants are really an important part of your wedding. I like to think of them almost the same way you would think of a DJ for your reception. Your officiant is the one who kind of helps you move your ceremony along. For the most part, they are going to be kind of walking you through your vows, any of the traditions you're trying to incorporate into your ceremony, any of those sorts of things. Your officiant is going to be the one doing it. So they're pretty important. For making sure that your ceremony runs smoothly and is a good reflection of your personality and the values you want to portray through your ceremony. So there are a few things that I think you should think about as you're selecting your officiant. First thing we're going to talk about is the different types of officiants that you might have depending on your situation. So the first one is if you're having a church wedding, there's generally two things that can happen. One, you are friendly with the person who's doing your wedding. You've gone to that church for a long time, or your family has gone to that church for a long time. You're comfortable with them, friendly with them. Great. And if that's the case, then you're golden. There's really not much you can do or that you need to do. That's who you've selected and that's who you're going with. The second thing that could happen with the church is that you are assigned or given a few options of some people that you don't know. And if you're given some options, I think there's some good ways to kind of check it out and see who is the best fit. I would really take some time and recommend listening to them talking. So whether that's their sermons or whatever, a lot of times you can find those online, especially now during Corona. But if not online, take a Sunday or two, visit them, and see what a typical Sunday looks like with them. You're not necessarily looking on topic. Obviously, a wedding ceremony is going to have a different topic than just like your normal Sunday, but you want to see how they're interacting with the audience. What is the general mood? Understanding that things might be a little different at a wedding, but just getting a general sense of them. Do they tend to be like a little bit more serious, or do they tend to be kind of playful? Do they bring a lot of humor in? What are the things that you are looking for, and which one, again, if you have options, do you think will be a good fit? The next thing that could happen with your officiants is, even if you're getting married in a church, they might not provide the officiant or give you like just a few options. You might have to bring someone in. So whether this is you're having a park wedding or you are having a wedding in a church with no officiant, I think a hired officiant can be a really great option. Again, you could know them. There could be someone in your life, not a close relationship, we'll talk about that later, but someone who's adjacent to you that has experience officiating weddings. But I would like to caution you and let you know that you don't have to pick that person just because you know them. Make sure it's a right fit, just like you would for any other person, before you go ahead and book them. But that can be nice if they know you a little bit, because then it's a little easier for them to personalize your ceremony. If you don't have anyone in your life who you want to hire as an officiant, then a stranger is probably who you're going to have to go with. There are a ton of officiants that do this professionally, both religious and non-religious, and they can be great. I've worked with some really, really great ones, but there are some important things that you should chat with them about before you book them. One of the biggest things is, what does their ceremony typically look like? What is their structure? They typically, most of the time, come from a specific tradition or lack of tradition, but they generally have a sense of what a ceremony looks like for them typically, even if there's some flexibility to create something that works for you. I also recommend couples ask them for some of their favorite wedding readings, or for them to suggest some readings to the couple, because this can again be a great way to get a sense of what their typical wedding might look like. Are they suggesting a lot of like really flowery romantic poetry, or have they suggested some like really creative things that are really fun and are something that are like more pop culture-y? Again, there's no right answer, but there is people that would be a better fit for you. The thing that's probably most important, like a lot of your wedding professionals, is the, I always say vibe. I say vibe a lot, but are your energies good? Do you feel like they're a good match for you? Your ceremony is like such an important part of your wedding day. It's like when your marriage actually happens, and you want to make sure that their energy really make sense for what you're going for your wedding day and is going to make you feel really comfortable and create a really beautiful moment for you and your spouse. The last option when it comes to officiant is having a close friend or family member who is not a professional officiant do your wedding. I think this can be really sweet because of course they know you guys really personally, so you're going to get an incredibly personal ceremony. But there are some things that I would definitely caution you to think about before you're like, oh my gosh, our nephew, Leopold, has to be our officiant. Because Leopold, like, wants to, and we love Leopold, so, like, obviously he would be the best. First thing to think about is, do they have experience and are they good at speaking in front of crowds? Because essentially that's what they're doing. They're going to be speaking in front of all of your guests. Even if you're not having them do a ton of speaking, there is still some speaking involved. So if speaking in front of crowds makes them incredibly nervous, then maybe they aren't the best fit. Another thing I want you to consider is, will they be too emotional on your wedding day? Sometimes, especially with parents of the bride and groom, we caution against that. It can be great and beautiful. I've seen some amazing weddings where, father of the bride does the ceremony, but if your parents, are going to be a little emotional on your day, you don't want someone who's going to cry through your whole ceremony, just because that makes it hard to get through and can make things like a little awkward. A tear shed here or there, okay. Sobbing, you're the only one who knows your family well enough to know if that would be the case for you. Another thing I think you should think about is, will they have the appropriate tone for your wedding day? Just because nephew Leopold is like hilarious and like such a fun time and like the life of the party, if you were looking for a more serious serious wedding, maybe he wouldn't be the best fit. Maybe he can switch to that serious mode, and you've seen him do so when he is at work. He does a great job switching that mode. But if they're not so great at making the shift from like friendly buddy time to serious time, then maybe the wedding isn't the best place to really work on that. Another thing that is hugely important is thinking about how well you work with them. Because you are sort of their boss for that day, you want to make sure that they will respect the decisions you make and that they will kind of allow you to be the leader in your wedding day. And then the last thing, and this is kind of important across the board, is a familiarity with the traditions you want to include and the backgrounds. So if nephew Leopold is from your side of the family, but you're also really wanting to incorporate a lot of your future spouse is from another cultural background and you want to incorporate a lot of those traditions, has nephew Leopold been at enough functions where he kind of gets the gist of it? Is he someone who could adapt to that really well, or is he someone who like doesn't have a clue and you don't know if he would be able to like pick up a clue before the wedding day? Then again, maybe he isn't the best choice. Now that you've selected your officiant, I think there are a few things that you need to talk about with every officiant, regardless of whether they're like the priest that's at the church and you just got him, or if it's like your best friend. You need to discuss this with anyone who's officiating your wedding day. First thing is the religion and cultural backgrounds of the audiences. I think a lot of times people will assume that the cultural backgrounds of the audience members will be the same as, whatever tradition the officiant comes from. So it's really important to have a conversation with them. If you were having like a traditional Catholic wedding mass, but 2/3 of your audience is not Catholic, you want to make sure to mention that to your priest so he can make sure to like clue people into what's going on. If you have decided to incorporate some, Indian wedding traditions into your wedding and your side of the family is white and his side of the family is Indian, you want to make sure those traditions are really clearly explained. We don't need it to be a college lecture on like what's going on, but just a little bit of a clue in, a quick explanation of what's going on so people can follow along with what's going on. So if your officiant has that understanding of the background of your audience, they can more efficiently do that. Because on the other end, maybe you'll have everyone at your wedding, you're like everyone except, your coworker comes from the same religious tradition as you. If your officiant knows that, then they're not going to take the time to maybe explain things quite so much because people don't need it. The next thing I think it's important to talk about is any areas that are like particularly sensitive for your family, anything that is like a no-go area. So a lot of times this can be politics. I don't know who would bring in politics to a wedding, but nephew Leopold, he's never done this before, so maybe he thinks this is a really good time to talk about who he's going to be voting for in the next election. It's probably not. But if there is some tension around politics in your family, mention that just so it doesn't come up on accident. If your parents are divorced and it's like a sensitive subject, make sure to bring that sort of stuff up. If there's some major family drama, if there was some tension about the religious traditions you're including versus not including, I think it's important to lay some of those high touch, high drama issues out so you're not feeling uncomfortable when your ceremony's happening because they come up on accident. You might just assume that they don't, but I think it's better to be really clear, like, don't bring this up and know for sure it's not going to come up than allowing the off chance that it might. I also think it's really important to spend some time with your officiant and talk about your love story with your spouse, what your relationship has looked like, what you look like as individuals, what you guys like to do together, how you fell in love, those sorts of things. Even though they can kind of seem personal, I think it's hard to be like, hi, nice to meet you, this is my fiance and this is how we fell in love. But I think it's really important to include some of those more kind of like sweet romantic details, even if that's not your style, because those details are really what makes a ceremony stand out, is when it is incredibly personal and sentimental to the couple. I think it's also important, of course, to talk about any traditions you want to include, whether that is kind of like the basics of like a ring exchange, or if you want to do something a little more outside the box, like one of those like wine boxes that you like seal up. There are hundreds of traditions that you can find online of wedding traditions if you're doing a non-traditional ceremony and you want to kind of bulk things up. So talk to your officiant, especially if there's someone who's done a lot of weddings. They might even have some great ideas. But if you have a tradition you want to include, definitely make sure to talk to them about it so they can do some research into it and make sure that they're comfortable kind of leading you through that tradition or introducing that tradition or whatever it may look like. And then the last thing you need to talk to them about is the structure and length of your ceremony. I think it's really important to have a pretty clear structure and length to your ceremony. It's like not a good time to wing it. You want to make sure that your officiant knows what you're planning on doing. Even a professional officiant, I would say, needs like a lot of guidance on what your ceremony needs to look like. And if you have someone like Nephew Leopold, he's gonna need like a lot. And I think it's important, especially if you have some sections where like they're like speaking or something, giving some sort of sermon, that if possible you can give kind of a little bit of a time limit so you can kind of keep an overall time to your ceremony. I think typically, I've seen ceremonies go anywhere from like 10 minutes to like an hour and a half, depending on how traditional it is. It is totally up to you what you're doing. I think if you have kind of just a non-specific ceremony, non-specifically religiously affiliated, even if it's like loosely religiously affiliated, if it's not tied to a specific religious tradition too closely, you pick it up when I'm putting down, maybe, then oftentimes 30 minutes like maximum is a good length to hit, about 20 to 30 minutes. That allows you to have some time to like really get into the ceremony, but they're your audience. Your guests aren't sitting there for too long just kind of waiting for the ceremony to wrap up. If you're coming from a specific religious tradition that lasts significantly longer, that is totally fine and amazing and great. It sometimes can be nice to clue guests into that so they know what to expect, but also like, you don't have to. That is all I have today on kind of the basics of your wedding officiant. If you have any questions for me about that, leave them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe for more wedding planning videos. We have a really fun one coming on Friday. It's not wedding planning, but it's gonna be a good time. I'm excited about it. All right, I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.